we're going to call the meeting to order. It is 7:31. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act due to the state of emergency declared by the government of the state of New Jersey and the United States regarding COVID-19. This board meeting is being held via video conference. Electric and regular notice to this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and/or the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the Township Clerk, has been posted to the bulletin board on the Board of Education office, and at each of the school buildings in the district. Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Here.
Mr. Cass?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Luer?
Wait, here?
Mr. Kim?
Here.
Mrs. Gould?
Here.
Mrs. Wagner?
Here. Okay, if everyone could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we do not have any special presentations tonight. So Dr. Forte, Superintendent's comments.
Okay, can you guys hear me? I think you can. Okay, so I added this to our every week update, is that all the schools are open right now. Things are going pretty well, and I don't want to jinx us, but for right now, things are going okay. Everybody's hanging in there. Today was a little challenging with the snow. It hit at a pretty bad time. The road started getting a little slick. The best thing that I can tell you is that we have some terrific drivers, people who make great decisions. And in a couple instances on the south side of town, drivers actually pulled over because they felt like the road was getting too slick and had the DPW come out and salt in front of them. So I thought those were great things. And I just wanted to share that with everybody. Most of the districts in the county were open today for business. Some of the districts to the west were not. And also, as you know, there are several districts that every Monday it's virtual as well. So we weren't one of the only ones open. I mean, around us, everybody was pretty much open except for the ones that do virtual on Mondays. For the last dismissal at Riverview, there was already a couple inches of snow on the ground, but we all made it through, and everybody chipped in and did a great job. And the township came and did all the sanding and salting too. So thank you to everybody. Damaris informed me of our extra aid that we're getting. Damaris, do you want to talk a little bit about it? I have all the facts here if you want them.
I was just going to mention that over my report, but I can talk to.
I'll leave it for you then. I'll leave it for your report, because very often you decline your report. So you have something to say, we're going to have you say it. Perfect.
Perfect.
We do have this thing coming up, a series of presentations for our parents, staff, and students called Coping with COVID. Some of our counselors are putting it together. The first event is this Thursday. Yep.
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got a text from someone that said that they are not able to get into the meeting. They're trying to get in, a member of the public.
I'll take care of it, Dino.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Sorry, Steve.
So we have our program called Coping with COVID. There's 3 nights. The first one is this Thursday at 7 p.m. It's February 25th. If the board members that are on the community Facebook boards, if you could repost my post that I did today on Facebook and any of your Twitter or anything like that, that'd be great. It's been out. It's been out on our social media. It's been in the Friday folder. It's been in my community updates as well. It's on our website, and we're hoping to get a good turnout this Thursday night for the parents and staff. And then we also have students in grades 3 to 5 on March 3rd and students in grades 6 to 8 on March 10th. And that's my report for today.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. Dr. Cullis, on to you.
Good evening. Just to update on kindergarten pre-registration, it is open. So if you have any kindergartners that you know of, encourage them to go on our website and pre-register for kindergarten. We currently have 123 students pre-registered, pretty evenly split between the two buildings right now. We have a Black History Month poster contest going on. It wraps up this Friday, so all submissions are due to either their school front office or the art teachers in each building. Just turn those submissions in, and then they will go for judging. The COGAT testing is coming up. COGATs are March 8th through 12th for grades 2nd and 5th. Second grade is March 8th through 10th. Takes about a half an hour each day. The 5th grade is March 11th and 12th. They do 1 hour on one day and half an hour on the next day. Virtual students and families have been contacted. I provided 5 opportunities for virtual families to bring their students in, so they can either bring them during the actual testing date, they can bring them after school. I have a date for after 1:30, so they can come in after students leave. We have a time in July, and then the other option is they can just wait until school reopens fully, and when everyone's in person, they could take it at that time. The 5th option is for students who have already had a cognitive abilities test through special services. They can just decide they don't want to take another one. So that's the 5th option. As far as NJSLA testing, the calendar is on our website, but I had said at our last meeting that the parent letter would go out on March 1st. Since then, the state has postponed testing start date. So I'm not going to send out the letter until we get more information. I don't want to send out all the letter and get all of the feedback from parents until we actually know if the state is going to move forward with NJSLA testing. But the dates are set, and you can look on the website and see which days are planned for your child and their grade level. And that concludes the Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis. And Damaris.
Hi. Okay, so as you know, we have started the budget process. Some of you have already contacted me and asked questions. Please feel free to call me or email me with your questions. We can do a Zoom meeting, Google Meet, a conference call, whatever is convenient for you. But please feel free to ask me questions and to clarify anything that you might need clarifications with. As Steve mentioned, we haven't received the funds yet, but we were allocated $145,000 for ESSER number 2. This is very similar to the CARES Act. It was allocated in the same manner as the CARES Act, and we can utilize these funds for improvement of air quality, for learning loss, and for mental and health services. We can allocate the entire $145,000 to one service or divide it throughout those 3 services that they are requesting us to spend the funds. And we have until September 2023 to spend these monies. So we do not have to spend it all at once, but we do have plans to probably spend most of these funds during the summer of 2022 for learning loss. And that would, additionally, tomorrow, the government will be giving his this government speech, at which time he will be probably allocating state aid for all the districts. Therefore, most likely by tomorrow night or possibly Wednesday morning, we would know if we were allocated additional funds for state aid. That will conclude my report.
Thank you, Damaris. Exciting news.
Yes.
Okay, it is 7:40, and we are going to open up for public discussion at this time. As it was already noted in the chat, if you have anything to bring forward to the board, just please type your name and you will be called on.
Mrs. Wagner, this is James. Could I ask Dr. Cullis and Damaris, Ms. Gorowski, a question while we're waiting for the public?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Dr. Cullis, you mentioned the kindergarten enrollment number. I didn't really catch that number. Could you just repeat that real quick?
As of today, so we've been open for registration since February 1st, so a couple of weeks, we have 123.
And is this number a number that's higher than expected, or on average, on par, or lower than expected compared to previous years?
This is on track for where we were last year at this time. If you recall, we ended in August, we had 190. Then by the end of September, we had lost and went, some students just, decisions, families decided to wait a year instead of going virtual. Some moved, some homeschooled. There were a variety of things that happened, and we went down to 158. And we're holding pretty close to that number right now in that grade. I don't expect it to be a small class. I mean, I expect it to be what we've seen the last couple of years, 180, 190 maybe.
And Mrs. Gorowski, this award money, is this part of the grant that you applied for as part of trying to get some funds, as to help with the COVID expenses that we were incurring? Or was this another sort of award?
It's not the learning loss grant that I applied for, which was 157,000, but it's pretty close to the amount that I mapped out for the summer program. So at about 157,000, we can service 200 to 300 students for an in-person summer program on learning loss. So if you're thinking the learning loss grant, that was a different grant. We haven't heard about that one yet. So we may get even more money, but it was such a nice surprise to see that we're getting this money towards that could be used towards learning loss. So if we don't get the grant, I had said we have 50,000 to spend because that's what we budgeted. But now we have also this 145,000. So we really could be looking at servicing 200 to 300 students.
Okay, that's great. That's excellent. So I didn't realize that this was a different grant. I thought it was one of the grants that Damaris or Ms. Gorowski mentioned during the Finance Committee meetings. So it looks like we lost Damaris as well.
Yes, so I think she'll be back. But that is her response. We worked on those things together.
Appreciate it. Congratulations. Thank you.
I'm sure Damaris will be back with us in a moment. I don't see anything in the chat. So I'm going to close.
I just saw somebody raise a hand, but I don't know what that means with a meeting like this.
Yeah, Laura, maybe we could give it another minute. I think there might be a question coming.
Sure, no problem. Cindy, do you see a hand raised? No, not at all.
I think I saw Cindy leave the call.
Okay, so we're just going to hang out for a minute. Does anybody have any other questions?
For Lisa Beck.
I think.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. About next steps in the process. So Lisa Beck, I wanted to ask a question about next steps in the process. I'm sorry, I don't know which process.
Yeah, no, I wrote it very quickly. Is it okay if I speak now?
Absolutely.
Okay. First of all, thank you guys so much for how you guys have all handled the students being in the school as much as they have. It's pretty incredible. I work in a local district, and I wish that the students that I work with had what my own kids have. So thank you all very much. I'm on here tonight, and I think some other people may be on here tonight, hoping to hear if there's any plans or any conversation about what the next steps might be in giving the kids more school.
Thank you for bringing your question forward and your kind comments. I'm sure that Dr. Forte has some answers for you.
So we're in preliminary discussions on what to do with the next phase. One of the things is our phase 1 was several districts' phase 3. So we are looking to do something else, but we are not looking to do anything while we're still in the orange level of transmission. That comes out weekly on Thursdays from the Department of Health. You could find it. You could find a link to it in our Friday folder and our community messages. So once those numbers start coming down, we are looking at doing something. We don't know what that something is, but we will definitely be discussing it and putting out as much information as we possibly can as we get closer.
Dr. Forte, can I ask a follow-up question, or is this just public discussion only? Okay, I'll wait then.
It's
It's up to Ms.
Yeah.
Wagner.
it's fine with me. Go ahead, James.
Do you think, or have you had discussions with the Department of Health with regards to how the vaccines might affect the different color levels, as well as part of what our plans might look like?
Well, one of the problems is we're really not getting much info about the vaccine. The teachers are not in any kind of category that's up right now, unless you have some other kind of a medical issue. So I really haven't been able to get information on when the vaccine's coming. But what we were told so far is once there's a certain percentage of the population is vaccinated, the number should come down quickly. So, again, we're in a holding pattern until we get out of this orange. But we do have a subcommittee of a group of administrators in the district right now, including the nurses, looking at what does phase 2 look like for us. But we don't envision any type of phase 2 or any additional students coming in for any longer or adding any time until after spring break.
Ms. Wagner, can I ask one more, just quick follow-up? Dr. Forte, one of the things that I think has been done really well is obviously containing in-school spread to the point that I believe that we have not had any confirmed in-school spread. And obviously, I presume, and obviously some of this is presumption, is that that's based upon a lot of diligent facial covering wearing within the building and very limited removal of the masks. Obviously, one of the big hurdles, this is probably no surprise to anybody, is lunch, where you have to take your mask off to have lunch. So I guess my question is, have you guys had the discussion on is that something that the nurses and the Department of Health feel comfortable with? And I know, sorry to kind of put you on the spot, but I'm just wondering kind of what the thought is on that, on the lunch.
Right now, while we're in the orange, nobody's comfortable with it. The nurses, the health department, anybody. So also, because we're every kid every day, we don't have as much room in some of the classrooms as we'd like. So we're looking for the weather to get a little better. We're looking for the numbers to come down, and then we're looking to start looking at phase 2 for us. But the lunches are a big hurdle.
Thank you.
And I know Dr. Forte and I had kind of talked about the vaccines. And I think that there's right now the guidelines, and Dr. Forte, correct me if I'm wrong, but the guidelines are basically we're acting as if no one has been vaccinated. So we're hoping to get some more guidance from the Department of Health, and hopefully that will factor into the equation. In addition to the numbers coming down, hopefully that'll factor into what the guidelines are for us going forward.
Yeah, I also reached out to the health department. I'm still waiting to hear back about sometime about 2 weeks ago regarding if there was a way to put some staff members quicker up on the list, ones that are more, working with kids that they can't really maintain the 6 feet of distance, things like that, especially in the populations of young students, special ed students, where they need more, they need closer work with an adult. For example, we have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, people like that. Some of them with some other special needs that they need the person closer. So I'm waiting to hear if there's a way to do that, to get kind of like another classification. But we're pretty much in a holding pattern right now in all this.
So I think that for the members of the public who are on wondering, I think to summarize everything, as soon as the administration knows more, I think that they'll be happy to share it with us. The priority is, of course, everyone's safety and health, and we just need some more guidance from the Department of Health. But I think it is important to note what Dr. Forte's already said, that Denville schools at half day, 4 hours in person, Monday through Friday, are kind of ahead of the game as far as other districts in comparison. So I hope that answers your question. All
Are there, you're welcome, Mrs. Beck, thank you. Are there any other questions out there? I see a lot of people on tonight, which is nice, thank you.
There's nothing else in the chat, Mrs. Wagner.
Thank you. Okay, so it is 7:51, and for now, I'm going to close the public portion. If you're on, there is a second opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment. And then, Dr. Forte, do you want to have our guest speak now, or do you want it to come up during the progress of the meeting?
I think it's okay to do when we get to that point.
Okay. Okay, so then we are going to go to old business action to be taken. Mr. Capello, would you mind moving us through that, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Under old business, I would like to move items A, B, and C. A are the approval of the reports from January 2021, the Treasurer of School Monies and Board Secretary reports. B are the education reports, report of student enrollment and the report of the health office, both from January 21. And then we have C, our minutes from the board meetings, organizational meeting from January 4th, the work session meeting and our executive session, also January 4th, and our regular session meeting, January 25th.
I'll second.
I heard Mr. Cass, thank you. Questions, comments, concerns?
Mrs. Wagner, if you don't mind, I'd like to, I was going through one of the reports, the health office monthly reports, and I noticed that the nurses are still calling parents on I guess, or families that are not making or reporting their daily COVID certification. So I wanted to really thank the nurses for all their hard work. I'm sure that it was there was a large number of phone calls early on, but it looks like there were 264 phone calls made in January. So yeah, first I want to thank the public for really chipping in and doing what they can for those daily certifications, but also to the nurses and the staff who are making the phone calls. So I appreciate every little bit that's being done.
It's a great time to point that out, James. I had, my entire family had COVID not that long ago, and I had to talk to 2 out of 3 of our building nurses about contact tracing. And I have to say that they were more diligent in getting back to me and following up than the Department of Health, who obviously have their hands full, but it's comforting. It was very comforting for me to know that our nurses were taking steps to make sure that our community was safe, even if the Department of Health was backlogged. So thank you to our entire nursing staff. You guys are doing a fabulous job this year. If nobody has anything else, then roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Luer,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, we are going to new business action to be taken. Mr. Anderson, would you bring us through personnel, please?
Sure. If there are no objections, I'd like to move under new business, item A, personnel, items 1 through 10 as a block. These include 1 new hire, Christina Handel, as well as some leave replacements and typical movement with our staff. As well as I did want to point out one item on here that we can certainly discuss if we move this, which would be the CJ Pride number 8. We've discussed a few times, but we can discuss even more.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Capello. Mrs. Gould, would you mind talking a little bit about the CJ Pride number 8, I believe?
Hi, I'm sorry. I missed the last meeting discussion about it. What would you like me to share about this?
No problem. I just wanted the public to understand what this was, what CJ Pride was, and what we were voting on tonight.
Sure, I wasn't ready for this, but no, it's fine. CJ Pride, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on this. It's a networking opportunity for hiring new staff and for the district, and it's an organization of, I believe, different. The staff at their schools, and that's one of the reasons why we were looking to join it, because even though there's no job fairs going on right now, they still have online efforts, but there's also a monthly meeting where I believe it's the superintendent of each school who's involved. They have a meeting to discuss various topics regarding hiring and diversity and equity.
Yes, thank you. I don't know. Katie broke up a little bit for me. Did everybody else hear her okay?
I also turned my camera off because it was been breaking up for me off and on tonight, and I think that might help.
Yeah, it was broken up for me too. I didn't hear some of it.
Do you want me to try again, or?
Just briefly, yes, thank you.
So it's, I'm just not sure what to call it, but it's an organization where participating districts, the superintendent attends a monthly meeting, but it's about hiring. And even though there's no, physical job fairs going on right now, it's the efforts in the monthly meetings are about hiring issues. And also the biggest issue was diversifying the staff and equity in hiring process. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's a co-op is what it is. It's a group of districts, kind of like the Garden State Coalition, but the sole focus on this is to diversify staff, like you said. And the big thing that they do is a job fair. I also want to make sure that you're aware that it says we're joining for 21-22, not 2021. We're past the time to join for this year. So this is a vote for next year. I know we had conversations about joining for this year, but I did reach out to them to see, and they said that they're so far along that it would really not be beneficial to do it this year. So they said if we join now for next year and we send them the resolution, they'll let us start in something like April or May. So we'll at least get something out of it.
So Dr. Forte, do they run on calendar year or school year?
School year.
Okay. So we're passing this, we're voting on the resolution tonight, and then this will be good through the following school year. Is that correct?
It'll be good through 2021-22, but they will let us be involved in the spring, that's the advantage of doing it now.
Okay.
And Dr. Forte, if you want to point out also, this is just the initial fee to enroll. If we continue with them, it's only a small fee every year after that?
Right. It's $2,000 the first year, and then it's $100 each other year. So remember we were talking about it costs $100 to join early, so we're not even paying the $100. So we're committing to join for next year is what we're doing.
I'm a little foggy as to exactly what benefit this district is going to get from this. Are we going to gain added exposure for minority job applicants? I'm not sure I understand it.
So it's a co-op, like I said. So it's a group of districts all around New Jersey, and we all work together. We network. It is for superintendents in some districts. Like ours is a small district, so I'm also the personnel director. But you do have districts that are larger that have personnel directors. So it would be superintendents and personnel directors that work together to try to diversify the staff. So it does give you exposure to diversifying your staff. If that's the question you're asking. That's the whole point of it.
And Mr. Lohr, we had this on one of our agendas, or it was scheduled to be on the agenda for discussion. And then we had the personnel committee go back and kind of follow up and rediscuss it because I had the same question. And I think some of our other members had the same question. In a year when we're really penny pinching, we wanted to know that that $2,000 was going to be well spent. And I think it was the feeling of the committee as well as Dr. Forte that this was a worthwhile investment to diversify our staff and kind of mirror more closely the makeup of our student population.
Laura, if you don't mind, can I maybe just add something from the committee when we had this discussion? Dave, yeah, the committee members, we were also a little fuzzy on this, and we were kind of on the fence about whether we wanted to spend the money. I think what tipped me over was a discussion that Sandy and Steve had about that it's also going to be kind of a networking, not only networking, but kind of a collaborative where they'll learn best practices from other districts, how to attract younger teachers of color, a more diverse population early on in their career, bring them into the district. I know Sandy was talking about that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to talk to other districts who've been, maybe a little further down the road with this, a little more successful. So that in my mind was the benefit. I think that's for me, made me support it.
So this is less of getting the district exposure to more minority applicants and more a question of getting the district exposure to tactics and strategies that have worked for other districts?
I think it's both. I mean, that's what I took out of the committee meeting.
I believe it's both. It's just the one is much more difficult during COVID times, so that's hampered. And I think that in our discussions also, Dr. Forte talked to other superintendents or members of the co-op and asked them about what worth they were getting out of it. So I do believe he did. There's a lot of research into it before just jumping in.
Yes, I did speak with a few superintendents. They were all, they all felt like it was a worthwhile cause, and they did feel like they've gotten some benefit out of it.
And I guess just Dave, I think if you take a look at the agreement, there's a few different things. One of them obviously is job fairs, which, like Dino and Katie mentioned, there was a lot of discussion on what value the district gets out of that during COVID. But I think also there was, hey, we need to get started on this. This is something we've been talking about for a while, and not our first attempt at continue to add diversification amongst the staff. And that diversification comes in a lot of different forms, as Dr. Forte has mentioned to us as a committee. But they've looked at doing things with certain schools like Hunter in New York City. We've worked in a bunch of different ways to try to continue to add diversity. This was one more way that they thought was beneficial. I believe, Steve, if I looked at it, there was about 35 other districts or so that are involved in it. And it's actually a pretty interesting list if you look at the districts that are in there, because I think that some of them may be in similar demographics to Denville. Milburn Township is on here, Glen Ridge, Glen Rock. There's a few on here that I recognize that I thought pretty quickly. Princeton, that may have demographics. Robbinsville, that may be similar to Denville in that perspective. So this is something for the public, so they know we've had discussions for several years on. We've really looked at our student diversification and our staff diversification, and the goal to try to understand, when you look, you say, well, the staff isn't diversified. How does that compare to our student population? And can we become more diverse? That comes in a lot of, like I said, a lot of different manners. One of the avenues is, for instance, male teachers in our elementary school that we, certainly struggle to try to gain. We've also looked at the applicant pool that is applied. So there's a lot of research that's gone into this before we've gotten to this point of saying, hey, how can we continue to become more diverse? And how can we try to find additional staff members that would add to that diversity amongst the team? So.
Okay, thank you. I'm still a little foggy on what benefit we're going to get out of it, but I have a basic idea at this point. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else they wanted to highlight or discuss under personnel tonight? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Hi, I'm sorry. I realize that there's one thing I do have a question about. Item B on number 1, effective date to be determined. Can we vote on an effective date to be determined, or do we need to put a number in that?
we need to wait until all the required documents, fingerprinting, and are back before we can hire any new staff.
Okay,
That's
but
the
we're
way-
allowed to vote on the hire before we get that stuff back?
Yes, is
we
that
need
correct?
we need to get her on board so she can give notice in her job. And then she has to figure out how many days notice. She wasn't sure of the days, but we need to get this on the agenda so that so she can start the process, because very often people don't want to resign from a position until the board approves it. So that's why we don't know the exact date yet, but this is a person that we need is replacing somebody else.
Okay, thank you. Then, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes. Okay, we are moving on to instruction and program. Mrs. Gould, would you move us through that, please?
Sorry, yes. If no one objects, I would like to move to approve the following resolutions. Items 1 and 2. Item 1 is a workshop with expenses for speech therapist for therapy strategies to increase your effectiveness as a speech language pathologist. Item 2 is approving a student teacher for the 2021 school year from William Patterson University.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Carlo,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, we are moving on to finance. Mr. Kim, would you move us through finance, please?
Mrs. Wagner, it looks like
Policy,
we
Laura.
have
Miss
policy.
Policy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Do you want me to move that as well?
Sure, thanks.
Sure. I'd like to motion that we approve for first reading policy number 4150, discipline.
Second.
I'll second.
I don't know who I heard first.
Did I hear Mr. Lure first?
Okay.
No, because I didn't second it, but I'll second it now if you want me to.
No, there's somebody else before Mr. Cass.
I think it was Anderson.
Mike.
Sorry, Mr. Anderson.
All good.
Okay, second by Mr. Anderson. Questions, comments, concerns? This is our first reading, so for the public, this policy will come up again at our next meeting.
And just to recap this is the policy that matches the one that we have for other staff members, 4150, Steve. This is the one for the non-certificated staff, correct?
Correct. We have the same policy for certificated. This is just for non-certificated.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Kim, would you now mind moving through us through finance?
Sure, I'll be happy to. I motion that we approve the following items under Section D, Finance. Number 1 is a list of checks for regular daily operations. Number 2 is to approve the contract for the school physician services for the next school year. Number 3, to accept a donation from Donors Choose for Lakeview School for the amount of $330 for classroom books. Number 4, to approve the contract with Dr. Richard Grip for the next demographic study, not to exceed $29,800. And finally, to accept another donation of $2,500 to help defray the cost of connectivity for low-income families, and that will be donated by the Township of Denville.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Questions, comments?
Can you guys remind me on what our final decision was on item number 4, the demographic study, as far as timing and all that? I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
We would like to do is we would like to have the demographic study done prior to the LRFP, because we're going to contract with our architect to do an LRFP. Part of an LRFP is to have an updated demographic study. So what we'd like to do is have our demographic study done in either late fall or winter, somewhere in the winter of 2022, like either late 2021 or early 2022, and then have the long-range facilities plan done after that in the spring of 2022. So that would be the goal. We would approve it, send them the contract, ask them to do it under that time frame, and then have those two work together so that we have updated demographics. Also, I feel the group felt pretty strongly last week, and I feel the same way, that to give us a little bit more time to see what happens with the new developments might be advantageous to us as well.
And for the public, Mrs. Wagner, if I could add, this demographic study will also help us make decisions with regard to Riverview Annex, or formerly St. Mary's, and what we should do as a district if we are to get an influx of students with regards to expanding or additions or buildings, new buildings. So.
Yes,
so can I ask a follow-on budgeting question then? Since we're not going to actually do the demographic study for another year, what budget does it come out of, this year or next year?
Dr. Forte, you want me to answer that one?
That will be included in the 21-22 budget.
Okay. If we haven't approved that budget, how can we approve a line item? We haven't approved the 2021-2022 budget. So how are we approving an individual line item on it?
We are approving the contract, but again, that doesn't mean that we have to do the project until the budget is approved. And like Steve mentioned, we're not doing the demographic study until the spring of or the winter of 2022. So we'll be way after the budget has been approved. If this is not included in the budget and doesn't pass, then I guess we won't have to do it.
Yeah, also, Mr. Anderson, as a follow-up, we also want to lock in these rates because the last quote we had was from last year, and it went up by, if I remember correctly, about $1,000 or $2,000. So if we want to get a general sense for the board as to whether or not we are going to move forward with Dr. Grip's study, or are we content with the old existing study that we have, which I feel is not enough data to help us make some decisions moving forward. But yeah, this is to really lock in the rates so that we give the commitment to Dr. Grip, and it's just a matter of when he's going to execute on the study.
Yeah, I get it. I guess my question was more procedural. Are we allowed to approve an individual item if we don't have a budget approved for next year?
Yes, you can, as long as it's included on the budget and is approved in the final budget hearing and it's part of the budget. Yes, we can pre-approve it.
Okay. Are we signing a contract with Dr. Grip?
We do have a contract, yes.
So does that contract have a contingency that if it doesn't get approved in the budget, like I don't want to get into a legal situation where we've committed to dollars and then it's, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to get in a situation where we're going to get stuck between two different approvals, and if we don't get the approval in the budget, then we're in a bad spot because we've committed to this guy and signed a contract with him.
Well,
We'll make sure that he knows that.
Until after the budget is approved.
We'll send.
I'm sorry, Denard, what'd you say?
We'll send him the resolution, and we'll tell him that right now, we have all intentions of doing it. It'll be in the budget. Obviously, if the budget doesn't pass, then we wouldn't be doing it. He'll know from
Okay, so we're not going to.
What was that, Mike?
So we're not going to sign the contract after we approve this resolution. We're going to wait until the budget's approved.
We typically don't sign the contract until we send a PO. Is that correct, Damaris?
That is correct.
And we won't be sending a purchase order until later in the year when Damaris enables the 21-22 purchase orders.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. I just wanted to also, sorry, I apologize, Dave. I just wanted to say thank you to the township for assisting with some of the connectivity stuff. I know we've been working really hard on trying to make sure that everybody in the district has connectivity. We're very lucky in Denville that we don't have as many issues as other towns and other districts, but obviously we have some folks who were in need of that as we move to a virtual setting, and I really appreciate the township kicking in some funds to assist with those individuals.
I may have missed this somehow, but I was under the impression that we were going to be talking about whether or not to go with air conditioning in addition to replacing the heat in the Riverview all-purpose room tonight.
You're skipping ahead.
Oh, that's in operation?
Yep.
Yeah, under B&G.
There it is. Sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough. I apologize.
It's because you're on both committees, so it's a little blends together. I also just want to say for the public, in our conversations about planning about the demographer, Dr. Forte and some other people probably referenced LRFP, which is the Long Range Facility Plan, which is a document that outlines everything that has to be done within the buildings in the district. So that's why that came into play along with the demography study and the timeline. And I just want you guys to remind me when we go to good of the cause, if we could also talk about our 5-year strategic plan. Does anybody have anything else under finance? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Capito?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
No on the milk fund, yes on everything else.
Mr. Lure?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, I skipped you.
Yes.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through operations?
All right, under operations, we have one item under buildings and grounds. I'm going to ask the board approve to upgrade the existing HVAC at Riverview Elementary School, which serves the gymnasium and all-purpose room to include air conditioning and heating. When we had our last committee meeting, and in my committee report, I provided some more detail on that. We spent a good amount of time discussing the pros and cons of doing just the heating as a separate project and doing the air conditioning at a future time. And there was cost benefit in doing them at one time in terms of the scoping out the project, the specs for the project, having the labor done at one time when everybody's there, rather than coming back a year or two later and doing a second project. So the committee thought that one and done would save some money and also put Riverview on the same playing field as the other schools in terms of having air conditioning in some of the larger rooms. So we did spend a lot of time debating it, and we thought it would be a good idea to get both of them done at the same time.
Before we go on to other discussion, Mr. Kim, was that you seconding it?
No, that was me.
Mr. Lure. Okay, so thank you. Mr. Lure seconded it. And then Mrs. Theodoropoulos, the principal of Riverview, is here to tell us her thoughts and feelings on the subject, and then I'm sure the board has questions that they'd like to discuss.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me join. I got so excited right there because it sounded like it was approved, and I was like, am I on just to do a happy dance? Because I will do it. But I did want to talk a little bit about why this is so necessary. I'm sure all of you do know, but if you just give me a couple of minutes to plead my case, because this has been on my agenda since first coming in 2012 at Riverview. We're always looking at how to improve the school. And as a principal, of course, I want to have a safe school, but it's also a place not only where students learn, and it's also where they thrive. We have been very excited about all the great things we have done to the building and the additions, and now with the annex, and it's looking great. One thing though, I would have to say probably as early as March and late in this year was even into November, is that we don't have a large space that can remain cool. And for several of our students, we have some health concerns. We have students with asthma, we have students with outside allergies, we have students with heart conditions, breathing conditions, and now post-COVID, we even, hopefully I say post-COVID because it'll be done soon, hopefully we see the need for a clean, cool space. I know this is the perfect time to add the air conditioning now that we're doing the heating, and I'm happy to hear that it's a little bit of a reduction doing both at the same time. I also wanted to just let everyone know what it's like at Riverview without this now, especially because we redid the library and it's a wonderful addition. We have the small classrooms, but I do not have a space that can be a comfortable temperature where I can meet with just my staff or with my whole community. I don't have a space where that could happen. And what I'd like to do first is just talk about the student's perspective. Because when you look at a building, the first thing I want to think about is the student's perspective. Then I look at it as parents, teachers, and of course, administrators last. For my students, what we really work on is they work hard, right? We want them to have a time at lunch and recess where they can relax, calm down, and have a good time. As you know, if you've been into the APR, it gets loud, got students, which is fine, got some noises, but then you also have to contend with the heat. For some of my students, lunch has become a stressful time, and I think that sensory input of the heat doesn't make it any easier. We've had students that we had to put in a smaller space to eat because it was cooler and they did better, but then I'm taking them away from their friends. That's the whole reason why we have lunch and recess inside, so they can have that ability. So every student is affected by that because every student uses the APR. The same thing with our gym. The students are running around. There's no place to open windows there, no way to cool those rooms down. We've had students get sick. We had 2 kids fainted the one New Jersey day I was here, and I will not tell you how many assemblies I've had students physically get sick due to the heat. The biggest thing too, I don't know if everyone realizes just how often I use the APR. So we talked a lot about lunch, obviously, and recess and gym, but I also use it for band, small group instruction, PT, reading instruction, lots of other small groups that we have to do, testing as well. So the APR is used through chorus and other activities throughout the day as well. I think one of the things that we are so proud of at Riverview is that we really worked on creating a community, right? And we have student-led assemblies once a month and activities throughout the year where we come together as a community. Even more so is going to be needed now with the annex, and I'm dying for that opportunity. As much as I get nervous talking in front of a crowd, I would give anything now to talk in front of my whole community again. But with those community events, the kids work so hard. They practice, whether they're doing world dance or they're doing a student-led community meeting on any of our rocket acronyms. We put the audience in there and no one can pay attention because of the heat. It becomes where all this hard work what the kids did doesn't become an enjoyable activity. And it's like, okay, how can we get them out? Whether it's lead graduation or graduation, all the special events, but also all our community to get everybody together. I also do PD. I don't have a space for me to do faculty meetings, which I do every other week. And then the PD that we do, the professional development, especially early on in the year and in the summer, it's just not a conducive space. I don't have the space for it. I can't fit now all of my staff. I'm keep on getting bigger. I don't have a space I can fit everybody together that's comfortable and that allows that community feel. The other thing, talking about community, is just how many people use the events, okay? Because we talked a little bit about, the special events like New Jersey Day and World Dance and things like that. But we also have it for our summer enrichment classes or after school enrichment classes. And so many, our gym is used all the time for community spaces. We have kids club in there as well. So we do use that quite a bit. If we had that space where I could have a cool space, I would tell you I would love, especially now when we need so much to get reconnected, opportunities for students to meet together as a grade level, even more so than we've done in the past. I just limit as many things as I can possibly because the room just gets too warm. So I also have students, as you know, that have issues, with behavior management and things like that. And we take them on walks. We need a space. We use the APR where they could do some movement breaks. We put the beam projector in there to also help those students that have sensory input needs, and they can play with that beam projector that we earn the money with. But again, if it gets too hot and too stagnant, it really can't be used for that either. So I implore you to just consider it. I know it's an expense, but it's a forward. It's really what we need to make sure that my students have a place and our students have a place, that they're comfortable. They spend so much of that day there, and it's used quite a bit, both spaces. So if we can have it in a place where we can make it comfortable and clean air, that would make a huge difference. And it's really the next step of where we need to be. So thank you for your time and consideration for this.
Mrs. Theodoropoulos, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I think I feel comfortable speaking for everybody on the board and saying that if our budget was limitless, we would love to put air conditioning in every room in every building that we have. So we definitely hear your plea and we want to accommodate you, but I think our conversation is about the best way to spend our funds. And I think Dr. Forte had an update for us that was in his report about the costs of this project. Is that right, Dr. Forte?
Yes, I want to make sure everybody understands. When we first talked about this, we were expecting it to be $400,000 for the heat and ventilation. That's still the same. We have to do that. So really, we're not really talking about that anymore because we have to do the $400,000 heat and ventilation. It's not working properly, and it's about 25 years old. We're spending too much money fixing it. So let's just move on past that. The only real question is whether or not to do the HVAC. So I think you heard a strong argument from Mrs. Theodoropoulos of how it will be used. I think there's no question in my mind that she'll make sure that it's used as much as possible. The other thing, though, what we wanted to make sure, I asked Damaris to set up a meeting, a call with our architects. I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page and they knew what we did last year to the electric 100%. So everybody was aware. So I gave you guys all those documents so you could see them. We had the call with them. We made sure they understood what we did. So going by the things we did to the electric at Riverview last year, we would have to spend $100,000 that's a budgeted number, by the way, a budgeted number of $100,000 to upgrade the electric at Riverview prior to doing this. So again, $400,000 for the heat, we know we have to do. It's $250,000 to add the air conditioning because it's primarily the reason why it's so much different than the Valley View. At Valley View, the ductwork was all going to be added anyway. At Riverview, some of the ductwork is already there for the heat, but not enough for the air. So that's why at Valley View, it was only $85,000 to add the air conditioning when we replaced the heat. So we have $400,000 for the heat, $250,000 for the air, and $100,000 for the to upgrade the electric. Now, the upgrade to the electric is a good thing, right? I mean, it does allow for expansion and other things that we might want to do that we don't even know about 20 years from now. The electric at the school is, getting close to the capacity. So it wouldn't be a negative thing to do. It wouldn't be a waste to upgrade the electric. But in order to do this project, to put air conditioning in the all-purpose room on the stage and in the gym, we would need to spend that $100,000 in electrical work first. There are other negatives about that. If you recall, when we did this work in Valley View, there were many delays. So even if we decide to do it right now, this might take some time and it might not be ready for the fall of 2021. I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it because of that. I just want everybody to know that there will probably be some delays because we'll be working with the power company as well.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. I don't want to monopolize the discussion here. I just want to bring everybody on the board as well as the public up to speed with some of the conversations that have been happening. When I spoke with Dr. Forte the end of last week, we talked about this, and my question to him and to pass on to you, Mrs. Theodoropoulos, was about the number of rooms the number of classrooms you currently have air conditioned. And I asked Dr. Forte to find out, with the current electrical system that's in place without an upgrade, what the cost would be and what the capacity would be for additional classroom air conditioners. So I just wanted the board to be aware of those answers as they take these things into consideration.
So it costs approximately, for budgeting reasons, around $2,000 a room to put in a window air conditioner that's, you know, like a commercial grade that handles a large space with a lot of bodies. So that's including the electric. So to have the electrician run a dedicated line, that doesn't include an upgrade to electric. Just have the electrician come in, run a dedicated line, and installing the air conditioning is about $2,000 a room. There's about 13 rooms, I believe, Mrs. Theodoropoulos, I think 13 rooms that are not air conditioned in Riverview. And that does not include the annex. That's just Riverview, the main Riverview campus. So the architect did say that with the current electric the way it is now, we could add at least 10 new room units to the backbone, to the electric backbone at Riverview. So that's something I just wanted you guys to know too while we have this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Forte and Mrs. Theodoropoulos, for that. I know that this has been a discussion amongst the committee, as Mr. Cass had reported, but I believe that during that committee conversation, the $100,000 additional cost for the upgrade electric was not, you guys weren't aware of that at that time. Is that right?
No, we were not.
Okay. So I'm sure that there's going to be some, discussion back and forth, and I'll be quiet.
Mrs. Wagner, can I just chime in real quick? Okay. Hey, so quick question, Dr. Forte, do we have access to the annex gym?
Yes, we do.
Isn't there air conditioning in that space?
There are some portable air conditioners in there, and it does make the room cooler. It's not up to the standard that we would typically have. I'm not sure. We haven't really. Tina, did you use that at all this year? You really didn't use it, right? Because we're not doing any large spaces, right? So we didn't test it out to see what it's like, right?
I turned them on. They make noise, but we haven't really had all the kids or anything in there. There's 5 wall units built up into the wall, and they gave us something to turn it on. I checked it out on the one day that was a little hotter. It got cooler, but I wasn't in the room long enough or with enough people to see if it pulled the whole large space yet. But I do know they turn on.
Okay. Thank you. And first of all, I should have said in the beginning, thank you, Mrs. Theodoropoulos, for coming on. I know you've got very long days lately, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Because I know I've been in that space in probably June or July when it was pretty hot, for when they were using that as a temporary space for the church while they were doing renovations. And it was, a decent amount of people in there for church activities, and it was comfortable. But was it perfect? No, but it was comfortable. So certainly the good news is we've kind of inherited a pretty large space there that we could use, that's at least cooler. I think Laura did a really nice job of summarizing kind of, where we have to come from, right? I mean, we spent about, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes talking about a $2,000 expense a few minutes ago. The $29,000 we approved for the demography study, Mr. Kim can probably attest. Him and I personally one-on-one have probably talked for 3 hours, 4 hours on it, in addition to a lot of meetings. So, obviously financially, we're always trying to stretch every penny we have, right? Damaris and Steve do a great job at the budget presentation to talk to us about 85% of our budget is non-discretionary, right? We're in the people business, right? We've got salaries and benefits that we pay for. And the more we try to stretch and get as many staff members as we can, we've added, security, class 3 officers and a lot of things. In addition to, we actually just mentioned earlier in the meeting, the long range facilities plan. I believe there's somewhere in the ballpark of, and some of this could have gotten shipped away. So I think it was 22 million at one point on the priority list, not on the entire list of the LRFP. And I would say we've kind of chopped away at that. So even conservatively, maybe there's $10 million left on that long range facility plan and that's just, budgeting stuff for capital stuff. And then finally, here we are going through this budget binder that, Damaris talked about earlier. We go through every single line item, and in here with the potential tax levy, we're talking about $465,000 for the whole district. So the dollar figure is just tough for me, tough pill to swallow. If it was $80,000 like Valley View, I think this discussion is quicker and it's a little bit easier and probably, a little bit more, appetite for the board to go down that road. And I appreciate Mrs. Wagner asking, and I know we've talked about it, Dino and I talked about this, was, hey, can we get more into the rooms, right? I was actually pleasantly surprised when we talked about individual classrooms, and I believe at one point Dr. Forte even gave us a list of like the percentage of the rooms in each of the buildings that we have air conditioning in, and what do we need to do from an electrical standpoint to potentially put it in all the classrooms. So a little bit of background just for the public and everybody that we spent a lot of time talking about how can we make the building as comfortable as possible for our students and staff. I was pleasantly surprised at how many classrooms already have air conditioning in the rooms, which was great because I didn't realize there were that many. I think the hard part is that this cost would be 1.25% of our entire budget. If we look at our discretionary versus non-discretionary, meaning, we have, I think, usually use the rough estimate of about 15% of our budget is non-discretionary. So if we use that number, it's somewhere in the ballpark of $4.8 million that we really have to play with. That's outside of salaries and benefits and things that we, don't have as much control over on a yearly basis. That would mean that this expense would be 8% of our discretionary budget, or almost 100% of the entire tax levy increase that we're evaluating for this year. And I understand it's coming out of a different budget, meaning the reserve budget. However, the reserve budget is fed by the operating budget. So if you reduce your operating budget, you don't feed as much into the reserve. So I'm having a hard time, and this is, don't take this as I've made my decision on this item, although you could probably see I'm having a hard time trying to wrap my head around a $400,000 expense for air conditioning. And it's just, if that was the whole building, we have a whole nother discussion. I think that would be something potentially that the board would be interested in. I personally, as one of 7, am just having a hard time with it. We waited, I think, 7 years to redo the Valley View field, which cost us $433,000. So we've waited on a lot of expenses that were at this cost level or even below, that we've, I don't want to say kicked down the road, but we've waited on to do. So I'm 100% in support of getting that HVAC, the heating fix in that room, but a little bit of hard time with some of the dollar figures for adding just the air conditioning.
Dr. Cullis, thank you, Mr. Anderson. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, yes, I want to say, but the thing is the timing, that's the tough part here, because if we don't do it now, it's never happening, right? I mean, from what I understand, that we could not go back to all of the architect designs and start over again. So it's not like you can say in 20 years, 10 years, you're doing this. It's now or never. And I just want to be really clear what Mrs. Theodoropoulos is saying. It's not about the classroom space. It's that we use a large group space often, and there is zero because we cut up the one space we had in the library, and the other space is now the gym and the APR that are hot and sweaty. So the other two schools, we're hoping to get a large space in every building. But if you don't do it now, it sounds like to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like we're never doing it. And I don't think you can fit all of the kids in the other building at all. You would have to, I don't think you could fit the entire school nor the entire group of parents in the annex. I just want to be clear that if, as the board is thinking about it and as parents are thinking about it and commenting, we're talking about now or never.
You're right, Sandy. It's a 20-year, probably a 20-year look. Like, in other words, you're either doing it now or about 20 years from now when this unit needs to be replaced again. You definitely wouldn't do it in the middle of those 20 years because you wouldn't make sense. You'd have to redo all of the duct work. It's now or kicking it down the road to 20 years to have the discussion again.
Dr. Forte, if you don't mind, did you ask the architect how much would it cost if 5 years from now we decided we really wanted to do this for whatever reason the need might be, how much it would cost for the architect's work, for the electrical work, for the duct work, and to add the AC if we decided 5 years from now we're going to do it?
No, they said this is the time to do it. We didn't even get into that because they have to reconfigure it. So it's really, it's an apple and an orange. We're either deciding to do it with the AC or not. That's it basically, because you would have to redo everything. So I didn't even go down that road with them.
So technically, the alternative to the cost would be if 5 years from now the board was pressured, or whatever the reason might be that we had to do this 5 years from now, we'd be looking at paying $650,000 again, right? So we did $400,000 this year for the heater, but if 5 years from now we needed to get the AC as well, as we would have to replace the heater and the AC as well. Would that be correct? Like we'd have to start over.
I didn't ask the question. If I had to just assume, please don't hold me to this, that the $400,000 for the heat, I guess you could subtract. In 5 years, it would still be okay. So maybe at the very minimum, it would cost $350,000.
Plus the electrical work and stuff like that, right? So
yeah, but then there is some savings, like, because if you do both at the same time, you only need the crane one time, you only need to mobilize the crew one time, you do all the any kind of abatement you have to do at one time. So it's not going to just be the cost of the air or the electric. It would probably be more, but again, I didn't ask that question.
So technically, it could be another $400,000 5 years from now, or even more. I mean, I might be sort of speculating here, but I think all of us can agree that if we waited 5 years from now and we're kicking ourselves for not taking advantage of doing it now, we could be potentially seeing a much higher inflated cost if we decided, yeah, we really need to do this AC. The second question, Mrs. Wagner pointed out that if we could potentially put ACs in the rooms, and you said the electrician said the electrical work can hold up to 10 rooms, but if we wanted to do the full 13 rooms, what kind of electrical work would we need to worry about to upgrade the system for all 13 rooms?
He wouldn't go out and say like what if it will work. He did say you could add 10 to 12 units.
Right.
So we need 13. I don't know if that means 13 is going to put it over the edge. And if it did, you would have to do that $100,000 job, is what we were talking about. You have to change the transformers and do all that work.
So technically, the 100,000 can also help us with the 13 rooms as well, right? So that's a cost that we are going to be faced with, because if we're going to put ACs in all the rooms and we can only do 10, let's say, or even 11 or 12, the electrical work, then that one classroom is going to be missed out. And so we're going to have to do the electrical room because we want to be fair and we want to do all 13 classrooms, right? We can't just do 10 or 11. We single out that one extra classroom. So we're faced with having to do the electrical work for the 13th classroom, which essentially is going to help us anyway, because that upgrade to the electrical work that we're going to do now for the AC can also help us put wall units in all 13 classrooms down the road as well. Would that be feasible to say?
That's correct.
Yeah. So essentially that $100,000 cost is something that I believe Riverview is going to be faced with in the future anyway. So granted, that is an unexpected cost that the committees really didn't foresee and really didn't have time to discuss. I do feel that this is an inevitable cost that the school is going to have to be faced with in the future anyway. So why not look to upgrade that now as well? Granted, I agree with Mr. Anderson. It is a large amount. I'm not going to deny that, the amount that it is, but we are talking about the students' well-being, the students' educational benefit. It's not like we're putting that money that's not going to be used and pushed aside. So it's hard for me to sort of, think about it and say, yeah, let's wait 20 or 30 years to put in a AC in a much, in the large spaces that's being talked about, when inevitably it's going to be potentially detrimental for the students. So I think it's definitely worth the investment from my perspective.
If I may,
go ahead, Katie.
No, if I was to follow up on that, I had a question. Dr. Forte, have you had any conversations with the architects or the engineers about how this would improve ventilation and would be beneficial regarding COVID? I understand that it may not be built until it's less of an issue, but I'm interested in if that affects the ventilation of the room, the area.
Well, right now it often doesn't work. So anything that we do to it will improve the area, the quality of the air. It's on its last legs, the ventilation part. Having the air would also help, because it would keep the room cooler and make the people more comfortable. Other than that, I'm not sure if it's really a COVID thing. It's really more of it's not working, so it's at that point where we need to replace it. I think that would also improve the turnover, because if it's not working properly now, and I just want to go on record. I want to make sure you guys know it. We have it working because we have a guy going up there all the time and fixing it. It's just that it's not working the way it should all the time. So I don't want anybody to think that we have no HVAC in that room. It's working. It's just, we're putting money into something that's beyond its useful life, and well beyond its useful life.
Would just doing the heating part fix the issue?
Yes, it would.
The just ventilating, not cooling off.
The V in the HVAC stands for ventilation, so it does improve the ventilation in the room.
So I think I just want to summarize that, because it sounds like either we're going to fix the ventilation or not. Regardless, we're, like Dr. Forte said earlier, we're going to spend the $400,000 to fix the H and the V of the HVAC. So that's not really the ventilation quality that you bring up, Katie, is a great point. But regardless of this decision, that's going to be fixed. Is that fair to say, Dr. Forte?
Yes, it is.
And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up, because James kind of made a point which I thought was different than what I interpreted. I thought that the conversation was that if we put 10 to 12 units in, that this electrical system that was there could contain 10 to 12 window units. And then at that point, we would have air conditioned every classroom. Is that not right?
It's pretty close. We have 13 rooms, and the architect said he expects you could add 10 to 12. That's why I tried to say, I don't know if that doesn't mean you can't add 13. It's pretty close, but that was what he would commit to by looking at the report that we had, that he said you could add 10 to 12.
I see.
Can I add? I would say that having air conditioning in every room would be phenomenal. I will tell you, there are times that I am observing at 1 o'clock, and air conditioning should not be considered, in my respect, I'm sure all of you would agree, as a luxury. I see students that like sweat is coming down. Kindergartners are the windows, every window is open. So now they hear all the noise, the heat, and then we're expecting them to continue to work for another 2.5 hours. And I'm like, sometimes they come to me for behavioral issues, and I just know that's a long, hot day. You're asking that kid to sit through and saying, well, I know it's a cost. I know how expensive it is. By no means, if we can get every room air conditioned, that's wonderful. But choosing to say, well, you 4 rooms weren't on the list, I think it's harder. It's going to make it harder for me to say just a few are on none. If we can get every room air conditioning and one space, maybe instead of the gym and the APR, if they could just do the APR, I don't know how much money we can bring down there. But reality is, I mean, I think we're going to need to do the upgrade no matter what, because I just don't think, and there's so many studies to prove it. I can share some of the studies that I did do some research in there too. But I will tell you, asking a child of any age to spend all day in a non-air conditioned room and expect the same level of engagement and cognitive abilities, we're expecting too much. It is too hot. They get red, they sweat, they put their head down. I have kids falling asleep. I have kids throwing up. I have kids saying it's too hot, I can't learn. So I would like eventually to have it where we could eventually work on every room being air conditioned, whether that takes a few years. I just think now I employ you because now is the time that we could possibly do the APR. I think committing where the next 20 years we won't have a big space at Riverview is really binding Riverview to not be where it could be if we had the air conditioning, obviously.
We also asked about one other option, but I don't see it as a viable option. It was putting like split units in there, like type you see in Europe, but you would need 12 of them for that room. It's just that, and that would max out all the air conditioning. So that would be it. So
right,
really,
wall units too, and I didn't know if that was a good option too.
Yeah, same kind of thing, basically the same idea. The split systems, the compressor would be probably up on the roof, or I don't know, somewhere on the ground or up on the wall somewhere. But 12 of them, that's a lot of split systems to do to cool that room down. I just don't see that as a viable option.
Laura, do you mind if I make a comment?
Please.
So Tina, first of all, thank you again for coming tonight, and thank you for your comments. I think you made a really compelling case for putting air conditioning in the APR. My question is, I guess, if you had to choose between air conditioning all of the rooms in your school versus doing the common area, what would be your first choice? I'm going to put you on the spot and say which would be your highest priority.
I would say if I could do air conditioning in all the classrooms and something to bring the temperature lower in the APR, whether it was some split units or ceiling fan, something has to happen. So I could just say they're having a comfortable lunch, no kids getting sick. You know, we could have a community meeting that, okay, it might not be cool, but if I can bring it down to 75 instead of 85, I'd be happy with that. At least it's something, you know, if I can get it lower than, I mean, I'm talking 89, 91, 92. If I can get it 72, would be ideal, obviously, but even 78, I would take in every classroom. That'd be great. So I don't know, because the ceiling is so high, how many ceiling fans we would need to have, or if we could do the same thing that the Riverview Annex had, something cheaper that might not cool the whole room down the way we'd like, but cool it down. That would be ideal. Every classroom and something in there. We talked about even doing outside picnic tables. I talked to, you know, Mrs. Beer, what else could we do? But the whole thing is then we get with the bees and the outside allergies, I really do need a big space I can gather everyone in a cool place too. I think the classrooms would be who would not say no to that, you know, obviously.
So let's just on the fly, let's see. I'm going to do it on the fly, so don't hold me to all this. But if we tried to do what you just said, we'd have to do the 100,000. Remember, forget the 400. We're doing that anyway. So you'd have to do the 100,000 for the electrical work. And then we'd need probably 6 split systems for the all-purpose room. So we'd still be spending probably about $120,000 on the all-purpose room, putting the split systems in there. And we can't just add the HVAC to the all-purpose room, because that's the one that's the most expensive. It needs the new ductwork. And remember, there's a portable wall there too. So I want you guys to have all the facts before you decide on any of these things. So it's really not a huge savings just doing the all-purpose room. It would be some savings. It's not like the whole thing goes away though.
Well, let's actually take it. Actually, what I was going at was a different thing. Let's talk about just doing all of the rooms in the main Riverview and the annex for the sake of argument. Because if you're going to do, you can do all.
I'm sorry, Dino. I
Yeah.
can't answer about the annex at all because we didn't do the electrical study. We don't know what they can hold, so I can't talk about the annex.
Right. Okay. But then the other question is, for me, I'm having a hard time getting my head around this because I think we're dealing with some of this in a vacuum. The other issue is, where are we at with Lakeview? Right? Because if we do this, what are we committing to do in Lakeview from an equity point of view?
So I think the reason why this is coming up now is because Riverview's APR and gym HVAC needs to be replaced. Like it's beyond its life, so it's time. So this is why we're having the conversation. Same thing with what we did at Valley View. These were things that were on the long range facilities plan and they needed to be done. And we decided to add the air at Valley View. So that's why we're doing it at Riverview. When Lakeview's all-purpose room HVAC needs to be replaced, then this would be the conversation at that time too, rather than, just doing it to do it. I could see though putting maybe some split systems in their cafeteria so that they could have a air-conditioned space for the cafeteria sometime too. So that might happen, but that's the reason why we're not really having the discussion about Lakeview right now, is because their system, their H and V are okay.
Right.
Didn't we just replace those, Steve?
Yeah.
No, their gym HVAC would be probably on the next go round. It was from the addition, so the addition's like 21 years old, so it's getting close to the next go round, but it's not quite there yet. So and
we didn't replace those units with the ESIP.
Those did not get replaced.
We did some.
Yeah, not those particular ones though. Not those two ones. It was
in the APR.
Not in the APR either. No.
Okay.
Mike, if you remember sitting in any kind of assembly in the APR or the cafeteria at Lakeview, you would rethink your answer because they're just as hot as Mrs. Theodoropoulos is saying about.
No, I'm not asking if we. That's what I'm saying. I'm not asking if we added air conditioning. What I'm asking is, did we replace the HVAC units without air conditioning? I thought that Steve told us that this was the only one that didn't make the ESIP cut.
So what we did, just to remind everybody, what I did was when we were doing ESIP, I had them list all the worst ones. It was like a list of about 10. The Valley View gym was one of them. This one we're talking about at Riverview was one of them. But there were 7 really bad ones that weren't functioning. And those 7 were the only ones we were able to do with ESIP. Number 8 was the one at the Valley View gym. And number 9 is this one at Riverview right now.
So, Steve, we have air conditioning in all the classrooms at Valley View and Lakeview?
No, we do not.
Okay, so, over the years, we've chipped away fixing up bathrooms and doing these major projects. And, I think we have to approach this with all 3 schools is, have a study done. How many classrooms at all 3 schools don't have air conditioning? What's the cost going to be for the air conditioners, but also the electrical upgrades to support those air conditioners? And, we're trying to get the budget done for this year. It doesn't sound like we can get them all done at one time. I guess we could if we want to, spend more money on these upgrades. I think we got to know what that cost is going to be and then move forward for it. I'm glad Mrs. T came tonight and gave us a firsthand experience about what the heat does to the kids in these classrooms, and how difficult it is for them to learn under those heat conditions, as well as, getting sick and having physical difficulties. So I think it's something we need to prioritize and start chipping away at that like we had all the other major projects. I don't know if there's time to start working on that now for this budget, or we vote and make a decision on what we're going to do with the 2 large rooms there at Riverview. But obviously it's something that needs to get done, and we have every classroom air conditioned at all 3 schools, and as well as these large areas there, like the gyms and the all-purpose rooms and the cafeterias. We can't get it all done at once, but slowly but surely, you look back over the last 10 or 15 years, we spent millions and millions of dollars upgrading our schools, and they're all a lot better condition now than they were. So got to keep it going.
I'll just jump in to address a couple of things that Mr. Cass brought up. One is Valley View, we did upgrade their electric and they can handle whatever we want to do. Riverview, we did not do it. We just made some repairs to the electric and replacements of some old fuse boxes that actually had the screw-in fuses. So that's been updated, but we didn't bring in more power. Lakeview, we did some improvements and replacement of also old and obsolete equipment, but we did not bring more power. So if we start chipping away at it, we did Valley View. If we knock out Riverview with $100,000 to upgrade their electric, the next one to be on board would be Lakeview to increase theirs, because they can add some units just like Riverview, but they can't add them all. At Valley View, we've been chipping away at the units. I've also been trying to be on like a system where if you buy, 40 or 50 or 100 air conditioners, you can expect that, in 7 or 10 years, you're going to need to replace them. So we like to be on a little bit of a system here, like a cycle. So we have been adding them every year. And what we did was we asked the principals to prioritize and list all the rooms that are hottest. And we've been chipping away at all those. So we are adding them. And like Riverview has, out of their rooms, there's only 13 left. We have been chipping away. We're chipping away at all the schools. But we will need to address the electrical capacity at Riverview and Lakeview if we want to continue this.
And I think for me, Mrs. Theodoropoulos, I think when you made an extremely compelling argument, but I think you made an even more compelling argument about the students in the classrooms. And for me, if we're looking at spending $200,000 or $350,000 now for one large space, but there's money, we could have taken that money and made every room, every classroom in the district air conditioned. In my mind, that would have to be the priority. So I think that if it was one or the other, for me, it would have to be the classroom space. And I would, especially in this year's budget cycle where we've been so stringent, not that we're not every year, but especially during this year with COVID and bringing the tax levy down as low as possible, I would rather see the board spend money in making all the rooms in your building air conditioned, as well as if Valley View is, then whatever else Lakeview needs. So I guess my question, Steve, is when, I know it's on the agenda for tonight, and I know it's because we have this in the budget, but can we table this? And if we do, when is the time frame that we absolutely need to make a decision for this budget?
I guess the last time you can make a decision on the budget would be at our budget hearing, which would be the second meeting in April. But that doesn't address the fact that we're just delaying. There's going to add a lot of delays. We're typically ahead of the game right as of now, just so you guys are aware. I think there's going to be delays in this project no matter what, just because of all the moving parts.
Just to clarify, if I may, Mrs. Wagner, the funds for this project will not be paid for by the operating budget that we're going to be approved with this budget binder and this budget cycle. These funds will be taken out of reserves. I see you smiling.
I know.
But for the public's sake,
I
know for the public's sake, I do understand. Yeah, we have discussed how to reduce the tax levy as much as possible. However, this dollar figure is not going to be impacting, the tax levy will not impact this dollar figure, since these funds will be coming out of reserves. And as I had mentioned individually to all the board members, I do agree that this is a large number, but our reserves can handle this amount of money. Otherwise, if we did not spend this money, it would be sitting in the bank earning interest, whereas we can use these funds to help, support local businesses, to hire individuals, to support, the manufacturers who also hire individuals to make the AC unit as well. So it's not as if we're wasting this money. This money is going to be put back into the economy, and not to mention the educational benefit that it will have for Ms. Theodoropoulos and the children, as well as the staff. So I agree, this is not a small drop in the bucket. However, it would be sitting in reserves if we didn't use this money. And we can't use reserves money for teacher salaries, anything else, or, insurance premiums and stuff like that, it's only for capital projects like this that, that where the administration has done a wonderful job to make sure that we have these funds for projects so that we can make the environment and the schools a much better learning place for the children.
So, and Mr. Kim, just with all due respect, though, where does that money from the reserves come from?
Yes, so they do come from past, I guess, surpluses, but but at this point, we have the money saved in the reserves, and at this, I don't see us in any kind of planning fashion that we could use this. I mean, this would be a great way to use this reserves funds, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, I mean, and the point is just that the only way you get reserve funds is by pulling it out of your operating budget. And that means you're doing less with your operating budget as far as whatever else you could spend it on, whether it be a teacher. I mean, this is 50% of the increase on our salaries for this year. I mean, it is 100% of the entire tax levy increase we're talking about for the next budget cycle. So just from a perspective, if we were to take out the $400,000, every dollar that we get from our taxpayers for next year would go to replenish, if we wanted to replenish it. I know we don't have to, but wanted to replenish to keep it at a certain level, that's the equivalent dollar-wise. It's 100% of the tax levy for 1 year. For this. So that's why the concern from my perspective is it's a dollar figure. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's a matter of our job is to balance the budget to make sure that we're taking every single dollar that the taxpayers give us and we're using it appropriately to make sure we've got the best education. With all due respect, it's not about helping the economy as much as that's a very good thing to do. Our focus has to be on the education of students and ensuring that we're spending the dollars that we get from the district very well. And I think this board does a phenomenal job with it, right? I think we've done a tremendous amount of projects. I think that, and not just the board, the administration, they spend the money very, very appropriately. But I think I just want to, that piece is very important to me, is making sure that we're spending. Like I said, we spent a half hour earlier talking about a $2,000 expense. And I think that's absolutely appropriate that we do that. This is a $400,000 expense that jumped up $100,000 and doesn't have a dollar number in the budget or in the agenda. I can't grab my head around us all being like, oh, another $100,000 this week. Okay, sounds good. I could not move forward with this in an affirmative way tonight. Do we have any idea on how much this is going to cost to run on a yearly basis? Maintenance and running it, electric and everything? How do we not, guys, we can't approve something if we don't know what it's going to cost us. There's just not enough information yet for me to feel comfortable to move forward with it.
Something to think about, Mr. Anderson. The $400,000 is something, the $400,000 part of it is basically something that I think everybody agrees that we have to do, the HV part of HVAC. The extra $100,000 for electrical upgrades, I seriously doubt that we would be able to air condition the classrooms without doing that part of it either. So we're going to have to eventually come up with that amount of money. What it comes down to is the $250,000 for the AC part of HVAC. And the cold hard truth is, if we don't do it now, it's going to cost probably twice as much than when we go down, if we decide to do it down the road. And the $400,000 or even the $650,000 is, I believe, about half of what we put into reserves last year, unless I'm sorely mistaken. Damaris can correct me on that.
Damaris, would you give us a little update on what our reserve accounts have right now, and also how much we plan to pull out of reserves this year? How much we plan to put in the budget from reserves?
Currently, and don't quote me on the exact amount, between the maintenance reserve and the capital reserve, we have about $5.4 million on reserves. After these capital projects, it will be about $3 million approximately.
And that's because we're, just so everybody knows, because we actually do have public today. We are doing a project at Lakeview on the roof. It's a 60,000 square foot roof that's ready for replacement. And what was the budgeted cost for that, Damaris?
2.8.
2.8 million?
I'm sorry, no, 1.6.
$1.6 million budgeted cost, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Laura, do you mind if I make a comment? Laura, I think you touched on something, and I think I'm maybe looking at this maybe the way you are, and I'm not sure everybody else necessarily is. This whole discussion in my mind has really brought up the idea of, again, if we were spending $80,000 to air condition these rooms, I'd have an easier time with it. Once we start approaching the numbers we're talking about, it's hard for me to justify air conditioning these rooms, which are maybe 10% of the school. They're not used all the time. I know they're used a lot. And Tina, you made, a compelling case that they're used often. But it's hard for me to justify spending that kind of money wherever we're getting it from and not have every air conditioning, every classroom in the district air conditioned. To me, again, as a layperson, that seems to be more educationally appropriate, educationally valuable. So I'm having a really hard time. And again, Tina, you came close to convincing me, I think, but I still fall back to the idea that I would rather spend this money air conditioning every classroom in the district and use the money that way. Again, no matter where it comes from. At the end of the day, it's taxpayer dollars. We always have to remember that, whether it's in reserves or it's coming from the current budget. So that's really where I'm at. But I do want to say,
let me make a recommendation. I'm hearing everybody's thing. I think, and even Tina too. I think these are good comments. So how about this as a plan? Today is the 22nd. We pull it from today, which is okay. And at the next meeting, I'll have the information ready for what would the cost be. We already know it's $100,000 for the electrical upgrade. We know it's $400 for the H and the V. But what we do is after that, we put room air, we do the $100,000 electrical upgrade. We put room air conditioners in, and just in the all-purpose room, we put split systems. I'll find out what the cost would be for that. And it's not going to be like, $750 and now it's $500. It's not going to be that, but it might be $100,000 less. So maybe that'll be a little bit more palatable. The only thing is I don't want this to be a moving target. I don't want to find that out. And then somebody says to me, well, what about this? Like, give me what you want me to find out so I can, because we have to move on this. We're going to end up losing our time here. So if there's something other than these things I'm bringing up, you have to ask me, because
running costs, as Mr. Anderson said.
So what I would ask,
running costs of the proposed systems, because Mr. Anderson brought up a very good point about that.
Got it.
I didn't hear what Mr. Lure said exactly, but and maybe I'm repeating your question, Dave. But my question then, Steve, would be, again, I have to agree wholeheartedly with what Dino said. My priority would have to be to spend, not let this money sit in reserve, James, but to take this $450,000 and put air conditioning in every classroom in the district. So if that's already accomplished at Valley View, what's it going to cost us to do that at Riverview and Lakeview? And then once every classroom is air conditioned, then I would feel comfortable looking at the larger spaces. But if I have a principal on our meeting tonight telling us that, kids are sitting there trying to learn and they're uncomfortable and we're asking them to concentrate and it's beyond expectation of what we're asking these kids to do, then I have to say, in my mind, the priority has to be the classrooms. And even if it's only, a month or two out of the school year, they have to be learning. Yes, the community events are extremely important and we need to do them, but we have to educate them first. So if we're going to look at spending this money for the large spaces, I would want to know what it would cost the district to educate or to air condition every classroom first, and then move on to the larger spaces.
Yeah, Laura, don't get me wrong. I think the classrooms are just as important. I think the reason why my position is so strong is because of the time-sensitive nature with regards to the APR, right? I mean, it sounds like the classrooms we can put in the units fairly easily, whereas the APR is a much more complicated project. So, yeah,
well,
I'm all for
upgrading the electrical system, though. That's the only problem. You're right. If it was just $2,000 per room, then that wouldn't be a problem. But we're at a question mark with Riverview, whether it's 1 or 2 rooms that we're going to leave off. And then I don't know where we are with Lakeview. So again, before we start putting, that money towards a large space in one building, even if we put the air conditioning in those rooms, what about our other building that doesn't have air conditioning in the classroom? So
yeah, at this point, the conversation is now going to lead to how do we air condition all the rooms in the entire district? So
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If we're using those funds, that's got to be the priority.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing. If we pass with this, that condemns Riverview for the next 20 years of not being able to put an air conditioning in a system that's now being replaced for that price. But in the other schools, that could be happening in the future, but I won't be able to happen for another 15 to 20 years for that. So I think that's really time sensitive part. I would have fought for every classroom to get it over it, but then not taking the advantage of this replacing it. It seems like it's short-sighted to me. As much as I understand the money, trust me, I get money. I just think that then we're saying for the next 15 years, Riverview can no longer have this ability. And I think that's where the timing of the APR comes in.
That was actually my question too, is are we in, and I just needed to ask Steve more about that. Are we going to have this conversation about putting in air conditioning at Lakeview in like 3 years? Are we back to that conversation? And then we don't get back to Riverview for 17 more years? I just was curious when we think the timeline is to have that discussion, like at Lakeview. How far are they out? I have no idea.
When you mean Lakeview, you mean the large room or the classrooms?
The large room. Like,
okay.
Are we going, like, is in 3 years or 5 years, we're having the conversation to put it in Lakeview, but then you have to wait 15 more years or 17 more years to bring it back up at the other one. So then you have it at 2 schools and not 1. I was just curious if maybe it's not even on the radar. Maybe Lakeview's not even in the discussion of having it at all at the big spaces.
Well, the only reason the large spaces at Lakeview aren't in the discussion is because their H and V are working okay. This is taking advantage of the H and V problem at Riverview that needs to be replaced to add the AC. Now, it's hard to compare apples to apples in this one because the ducting system might be more closely like the one at Valley View, where it only costs $80,000 to add the gym AC. You see what I mean? Like the ducting at Riverview is not made for AC, so it needs to be redone. That's why there's so much more cost.
Hey, just real quick, Laura, if you don't mind me just adding real quick, but I think it's great to have the conversation on understanding this. I think that this is the homework that we need to do to understand, hey, what is it going to take to put air conditioning in the whole district? What is it going to take to each specific rooms and everything? What's the timeline on the AC units and the other large spaces? But I would be careful to say that me as one of 7, if the timing is right for one place, I don't want to hold it up for another. That's crazy, guys. Like I hear a lot of stuff in other districts, particularly our high school district, on the equality. They won't do it. They won't put lights on one field because they can't put lights on another field. That doesn't, to me, just one of 7 on the board. I don't think that makes any sense, guys. If we could do something that helps a school, just because we can't do it at another school, let's not hold off on it. So, I mean, I think it's great to understand the homework behind it, because if we start going down this path, then we want to make sure we understand how we can have a pathway to get there. But I don't want to hold back on one building because we can at another. That's all.
You know, I also want to bring up our capacity to do projects. That's one of the reasons why I like to do it one at a time, because we're doing a huge project at Lakeview. This is probably not the time to do some of this stuff at Lakeview. The roof, it's 60,000 square feet of roof is getting replaced. So that makes sense to do the roof before you do the HVAC too, if that makes sense, right? Because then you're taking off the units and fixing them. So let's I'm okay with this. If there's not enough, there's too much uncertainty. My feeling from the board members is there's too much uncertainty to have to put everybody on the spot and vote on this. But I'm going to want you to vote on it the next time. I'm going to do like a short presentation about what we have district-wide and a proposal, a plan, but we're going to have to make a decision soon. So it's going to have to come to a vote. And if people don't want to do it, they're going to have to vote no. There's no really other way to do it right now. I have to get moving on it, or we just won't have it done.
No, and I think that's a good point, Steve, is that, like you said, let's not keep kicking the can down the road. Let's make sure that, we've had a good discussion about it tonight. Are there any other questions that or any other thoughts or proposals that you want Steve, to look at and find the answers to before we come to what we think is the best solution for the district in 2 weeks.
Yeah, here's the game plan. We're gonna work on this. Me, Damaris, and Mike. We're gonna figure out what to do. We're gonna get on the call with the architects, and we're gonna do a short presentation. We're gonna do it at the IMP committee meeting, and we're gonna do it at the finance committee. So I hit all 6 board members at committees. I'll talk about this thing with my weekly meeting with Laura. So every board member has this, and then at that time, I'm gonna have to put you on the spot to make sure I'm answering all your questions. You're going to have to ask me the questions that you need. And then on the 8th, when we'll have it one more time, I'd like to have a decision from the board as which way we're going so we could tell our architect to get moving on it.
It would probably be useful to have current running costs for the existing HV system, as well as the projected running costs for both a new HV and a new HVAC system.
We're going to work on that. We'll do the best we can of trying to get those numbers. Those are difficult numbers, but Damaris and I will work on it.
And Steve, while we're looking into things, is there, and I know, you guys had said the space in the cafeteria at the annex, is there any other space in the annex that we can look at that would be a useful large space for us?
The annex has 2 large spaces. The cafeteria, which is not huge, it's got about 100-person capacity, and the gym is an okay size. I mean, it's not huge, and we're in the middle of the COVID stuff, so it's kind of hard for me to gauge how many people could fit in there. But I would say you could fit a decent amount of people in the gym. But again, we don't own that building. I don't know how much we want to invest in their electrical infrastructure in a building we don't own. So for right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tina, the rooms in the annex have portable air conditioners, and they're keeping the rooms livable. They're not perfect. It's not like down to 72 like you said, but you're keeping them to 78-ish or something like that. Is that right?
So the rooms that face not the road, but the other side facing towards the church, those are the hottest rooms. And in all of those and then the 4 of those rooms that are currently being used, we put portable air conditioning. We didn't put the windows.
And I want to make sure everybody knows, again, I did not commission a study to find out what they can handle there. So I don't really know. I don't even know what we would have to do to add air conditioning over there.
The other side does stay cooler. So at least we hit the hottest rooms. We did hit the hottest rooms so far. We'll see what it's like later. But before I just want to say thank you so much for just strongly considering this. I will tell you, this will probably bring us, if we do get it, where we need to be. I feel like to have a functioning school March throughout the whole year. It'll make a significant difference more than anything else, because we looked at outside spaces, everything else we can bring up. This has been on my list and will continue. I'll just keep bringing it up every wish list. This will make a difference for every kid at Riverview. There's no question. So thank you for inviting me and listening to me. And I will continue to fight for this as long as I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw my motion and ask Dave for an okay.
I'm okay with it as well.
So it's tabled.
Thank you. And Mrs. Theodoropoulos, thank you for being patient and waiting. Unfortunately, this was the last agenda item tonight. And then sitting through our lengthy conversation and answering our questions. Thank you for taking the time after a very long day already.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's I want to go on record that it wasn't tabled, it was withdrawn by the superintendent. There's a difference in procedure.
Agreed. I would like to, under operations, I would like to ask if we have heard if we've gotten an update on the electric bus grant. I seem to recall last time they told us that it was on, they were still, they hadn't decided whether or not they were going to do them, or so. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Mr. Wu, the last time I communicated with the department was at the beginning of February, and they told me that by the end of February they will be making a decision, but I don't see them making a decision yet because I still haven't heard back from them. And at this time, I don't have any buses on the budget, and if we do need to buy any, we will have to use other funds to do so. But I did not hear back from them yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else under, Dave, I know you kind of brought that up under operations. Anything else under operations that we wanted to discuss?
No.
I don't know if you can hear my dog crying, sorry. Okay, so we are on to good of the cause, committee reports, correspondence, and discussion items, as we haven't done enough discussion already. What do you guys have?
Hey, Laura. I'll quickly mention I attended the CPAC executive board meeting this past week. It went really well. Sorry about the noise in the background there. We had a really good discussion on the challenges, and parents discussed some of the challenges they're having with their special ed students during the existing COVID time, and had a really productive conversation with Ms. Johnson on kind of some ideas and strategies. So I thought that went really well. Also, the CPAC committee, I was not in attendance, but they had a virtual coffee hour where they had 17 special ed parents join. It was one of the most successful ones they've had. They have those once in a while. So it was really good to hear that there was some great conversation there. And I think some of the parents who are more tenured or have students in the special ed programs for longer, we're really able to help some of the newer parents that had questions. So that's going really well. And I just wanted to give that as my quick report for the CPAC executive meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Laura, if you don't mind, I just had one item. Damaris and I actually attended a virtual Zoom session with the juniors at the Morris County VOTEC, the Education Academy, this week. It was their juniors, and they're studying school district operation, board management, also administration. So I invited Damaris along, and it was a great session. The kids were really interactive, asked a lot of good questions, and I found it was really enjoyable. It was these kids are really motivated and really interested in learning as much as they can. So I enjoyed it very much. I hope Damaris did too.
I did too. They were really engaging, and they had great questions. And one of their questions was actually, what has been the most embarrassing moment in the life of a board members? And coincidentally, I mean, we had one recently, and but Mr. Capella handled himself really, really well, and had only great things to say about Denville.
Mrs. Wagner, this is James, if I may. I think, I want to say thank you to Dr. Forte and Ms. Gorowski with all the budget work. I know that they've spent a lot of time and they've spent a lot of time going back and forth with myself and the Finance Committee. So hopefully we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I want to thank them for that. I just wanted to add closing thoughts to our discussion with the HVAC in Riverview. I know that Mr. Anderson and Mr. Capello said that we want to watch the taxpayers' dollars, and I'm very cognizant of that. And I feel like I do that personally myself, but at the same time, every fiber in my being is like screaming that we should be spending the extra money. If it was our house, like granted, it's maybe not a good analogy, but if it was our house, we would probably want to not cut corners in our house, right? And to me, not to suggest that any of the other solutions would be cutting corners, or be substandard, but I mean, let's talk about the substandard spaces with the trailers and everything else. I mean, it's just, if we're going to do something right, we should do it right. And I know the question is whether or not we should have AC versus not. But I mean, if we're going to upgrade the system, and the final question is, how long are we going to use the school for? Are we going to use the school for another 100 years? So if we are, then this is a awesome investment into the school. So every fiber in my being is sort of suggesting that we should be looking to upgrade the schools in the district to the best standards possible, the standards that we are accustomed to seeing and the standards that we've set ourselves for, and Dr. Forte has set. These are just, some of the things that have been crossing my mind. I do understand that there's other costs that we have to worry about as well. But, if we are going to upgrade the schools, and try to do the best we can for the district, I mean, this just seems like something that we shouldn't be cutting corners on. And then finally, you asked someone to remind you that you want to talk about the 5-year strategic plan. So that's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Yes, Dr. Forte, I did want it while we were talking about, I think Dino and I were talking last week about all these long-range plans, the long-range facilities plan, as well as when we're going to plot in the demographers study along with that. And it keeps coming up in my mind that our strategic plan is ending. When exactly? Is it the end of next school year?
The end of next school year.
Yeah, so that means that next school year we should be planning the new one. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Not that that's really an expense. It's just something that I think we should need to factor in.
It's a little expense. It's around, it's about $5,000 probably, and give or take. Not really around 5,000, probably a little under that.
And who knows with COVID and what's going to happen, but I just want us to put that on our radar and start planning for that and fit it well into the timeline of the long range facilities plan, so that we have we know where we're going to be with the buildings, we know where we're going to be with the demographer, and to put that on our schedule as well.
Yep.
Does anybody have anything else? We don't have a need. Oh, I need to open it up. Let me just say that. So I guess it's 9:33. We're going to open up for second public comment. There was a comment earlier. I don't know if she's still on here. But if anybody has a comment, go ahead and type into the chat or unmute your mic, and we will call on you. So while we're waiting, I just wanted to read a comment that came up earlier in case somebody doesn't see the chat. Mrs. Steyer said during the conversation about the air conditioning in the APR in Riverview, she writes, "I'd just like to say if you attend an event in the APR at Riverview during hot weather, it's very justifiable," meaning the need for the air conditioning in the HVAC. "I've watched teachers, parents, and most importantly, students melt. And thank you, Mrs. Theodoropoulos, for always advocating for your kids." So I just commented to her in the comments that we would read that during public session. And of course, thank you to Mrs. T for coming out and advocating for her children, as she always does. I don't see any other public comments coming up. I know we still have a number of people on here. So did I open it at 9:33?
Yes.
Okay. So it's 9:34. So we're going to, I don't see any more. So we're going to close public comment section. We do not have a need for an executive.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kim. All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, guys. Thank you.